Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Lana Del Rey album. I mean, for the sake of censorship, I'm gonna call it Norman friggin' Rockwell. LA indie pop icon Lana Del Rey. Since her 2012 debut, Born to Die, she has been a very polarizing figure. There was that awful Saturday Night Live performance. Also, the lyrics on this album were on the trashier side. But even though this is far from a perfect album, something about Lana's performances always captivated me about this album. There were singles that dominated the indie pop world for years, like Summertime Sadness, Blue Jeans, and the title track. But there's also some great deep cuts like Carmen and Off to the Races. And ever since, Lana has just sort of grown up with every release. Ultraviolence, her next album, showed her kind of dripped away from the trip-hop vibes, bringing more indie pop, Baroque pop, even some alternative rock influences with varying results. But at the end of the day, this was still a much more interesting and mature album. But around 2015 and the Honeymoon album, I feel like people's perspectives on Lana tried to shift in a more positive light. Honeymoon is just so much of a different album. It's so cinematic in parts, and once again, much more grown up. And hot take, I do think that, like, Lust for Life, or what it is Lana's best album. Now, there were some truly awful tracks on there. I'm still having summer bummer nightmares to this day. But as far as a statement goes, and a writing standpoint, this blows every other Lana Del Rey album out of the water completely, and not to mention, Love is just a gargantuan track. Now, it has been a few years since we've heard from Lana. She's spent the better part of the last year dropping these incredibly mature, very different singles for her. It's been one of the most anticipated albums of the year, for myself included. Let's chat about this. This album starts off with its title track. It's actually a very cinematic, classic, very classy sounding intro. If you were into her Born to Die days, though, this is nothing new to you. But once that kind of washes away, we do get a very sincere, beautiful piano ballad, which, spoiler alert, you're going to hear a lot of on this album. It's a very broken sounding track, with just so many memorable one-liners. Like that one about blaming the news on your bad poetry. That is something special. You know, it's so strange throughout this album, even though this is far beyond where she was on Born to Die, there are brief glimpses of that old Lana Del Rey. But my God, if you want to talk about an opener that gets your brain ticking in the right direction, look no further than this. I really do feel like we've just watched her come full circle here, and she's at a completely different place. I am so happy with this as an opener. And even though it's come out almost a year ago to the date, I still love Mariner's Apartment Complex so much. I love the very old school approach to folk rock here. Hell, this practically comes off like a protest song at parts. And honestly, yeah, it's really powerful. I have to really hand it to this very light yet very powerful instrumental, as well as Lana's songwriting, which you're going to hear me say this a lot, it's like her best ever. It's still a very broken Lana Del Rey at times, but as you're going to hear me say once again, there's almost always a sliver of hope at the end of these tracks. I do have to say, though, it's a lot to take in, and I think that it's the kind of listen that you will benefit more of if you're sitting there with a lyric sheet. Now, to call this album her most mature work to date is an understatement. We have Fuck It, I Love You, which honestly is one of my favorite tracks here. It has this very classic, classy approach to pop music that I feel like Lana just takes under her wing so easily. It's very breezy, it's very sweet, much like a lot of this album. I do have to point out, though, I feel like the sentiment of this track has been done by Lana in the past, but that doesn't make it any less charming. It may be the most straightforward track of the bunch, but damn, is it ever good. And let me just say, because I really haven't pointed it out so far, for this album she partnered up almost completely with Jack Antonoff of Bleacher's fame, and he's written friggin' tracks for everybody at this point. Their partnership is amazing. I have a lot of the same feelings on How to Disappear. This one shows again Lana going back to that sort of lounge singer act. We get these tales of men who have wronged Lana in her life. Honestly, it's something that we've heard from her before. But this time around, it's a little different. We're hearing about men who Lana actually felt safe by, protected by. But because this is sort of a new era of Lana Del Rey, we do get that slightly positive ending, and it's just so much more mature and well presented. The next Best American Record is just this sort of tender pop tune that Lana has just gravitated towards completely, and for good reason. She sounds great on these tracks. And an album that's just been packed with heartbreak. There are some genuinely sweet sentiments here. It's really refreshing. and the whimsical atmosphere, and the wailing guitars in the background, and the hazy strumming. These are all very interesting elements to this track. It's something that you hear a lot of on this album. And honestly, it's making her sound much more retro than anything on her first few albums ever did. And Happiness is a Butterfly. Honestly, one of the best tracks here. This track is absolutely earth-shattering. Honestly, we know that Lana is always like the bad boys. We've heard about it for years. But my God, the portrait that she paints of herself on this track and on a lot of this album is absolutely stunning. And the fact that she just keeps reaching out to dance with this guy that she's with, it's just heartbreaking. This album is a sea of emotional tunes, but with Happiness is a Butterfly, Lana has written easily the one that's closest to her heart. And honestly, it's a track that I feel like we've all almost felt at one point or another. It's pretty unbelievable. Now, I do have a couple of tracks that fit into my middle of the road column, sadly. First off is her cover of Doin' Time by Sublime. Now, honestly, for me, it's just kind of alright. Like, it's weird. As the cover goes, I think it's pretty good. As a matter of fact, I think her smoky performance here is just fine. But I don't know, if you ask me, it just kind of sort of sticks out like a sore thumb amongst all these other tracks. Like, this has been an album of Lana Del Rey moving forward, trying new things, maturing. Like, this kind of sticks out to me as like a non-album single or a B-side to one of the singles here. Like I said, her performance is great, the production is actually fantastic, I just don't think it really belongs here. Cinnamon Girl, I don't know, man, this one doesn't really hit me as hard. And it's a shame, because lyrically, I do think it's just as powerful as almost every other great track here. But for me, I don't feel like Lana's performance just reaches out and grabs me nearly as hard here. Some of her vocals to me are coming off a little awkward all of a sudden. Not to mention, this is the first track here that the production has really stood out as not that good. And the constant back and forth between these more ballad sections and more straightforward sections also comes off a little awkward to me as well. And it's a serious shame, because this is a track of standing up and this empowering statement that really does coincide very nicely with all the rest of the themes here. And by the end of the track, some of the effects are very cool that make it very psychedelic. So as you can see, even when this album kind of trips over itself a little, there is still a lot to love. I have a lot of the same feelings towards California. I can't help but feel like this is just sort of an average performance from Lana here. Especially when you take into consideration just how powerful most of this album is. Again, I do continue to love the lyrics, and I can't help but be drawn to just how poetic they are. But as a track as a whole, I feel like there are just much better examples of this here. And with Bartender, like, it's very lovely, it's very likable when it's on, but I do feel like some of her song concepts are starting to float into each other and overlap. Even her performance here, once again, doesn't stand out as much. I digress, though. The rest of this album is an absolute triumph and one of the best indie pop singer-songwriter albums, whatever you want to call it, that you're going to hear this year. We have the over 9-minute Venice Bitch. That is genuinely a really daring track for Lana. For the most part, once again, we're dealing with a pretty straightforward folk rock tune. And honestly, Lana sounds freaking amazing on this track. It's very wispy, it's very wintry, and it's absolutely sweet, but Lana still just has so much to say, and it comes across very easily for her. But what ends up following is absolutely fascinating, as this track morphs into this psychedelic rock odyssey practically by the end of it. Constantly shifting, super hazy, and hard to follow. And honestly, not for a second does she come off full of herself. It doesn't come off pretentious. As a matter of fact, it comes off like Lana's been doing this for years. Honestly, even more so, it comes off like oddly timeless, strange. And like moving into this direction, I was just like, honestly, does this track need to be almost 10 minutes long? Yeah, it does. Love song kind of shows Lana going back in that sort of lounge singer direction. And honestly, here it's really well done. Like some of these piano ballads here, yes, please, they sound great. And I'll be honest, like, yeah, the first couple of times I listened to this track, wasn't that into it, but it's grown on me massively. Like, some of the more spoken word pieces here do come off a little cheesy, but the very hopeless in love element to this track is just so charming. And the greatest is honestly pretty incredible. And as far as like a single goes here, might be my favorite. Like, outside of the finale, if one track really summed up the feeling of this entire album, it would certainly be this one. There's just such a great sorrow to this track, much like Lana's early work. But here, it seems like almost justified. Like, more than anything, I just kind of want to reach out and give Lana a hug. It's lonely. It just seems so final to me. Like the damn world is gonna end. And Lana just kind of seems like at the center of it all, ready to man the torpedoes and be the last woman standing no matter what. Like, yeah, this track is freaking amazing. It just comes off as such an anthem. I love it. And finally, we have the finale here. Hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have, but I have it. Now, going into this track the first time that I heard, I really didn't know what to expect from this album. Obviously, this track, even after everything we just heard, is a slew of Lana's most mature bars to date. But after hearing everything else here, this honestly comes off like the mission statement to it all. This has been an album of pain and heartache. More times than not, like I mentioned earlier, there is that small sliver of hope, and that is what this track is. We've come full circle here with these incredibly poetic visual lyrics. It's unbelievable. And Lana's final tear-jerking vocals are just icing on the cake. So, while I started this video saying that Lust for Life is easily Lana's best album, I have to change that and say that now Norman fucking Rockwell is the best Lana Del Rey album. This is the album that she's been working towards for years. The mature position on things, the poetic lyrics, completely ditching behind who she once was and coming back as this woman with just so much to say. Her and Jack Antonoff have done an amazing writing job here. The production is fantastic, and it's honestly like a really daring album. Yes, there are a few tracks here that I feel like some of her ideas overlap a little bit, which stinks, but still, this is one of the best singer-songwriter albums you are going to hear this year. I'm feeling a very strong 8 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.